Okay, now this one I did go over last night.
Well, hopefully the
So-
charts are good enough.
Okay, let's go back to that.
Yeah.
So it's still saying practical circuits for some reason or another. But anyway, to continue on, using basic test instruments and soldering. Okay, so does anybody work in electronics? So like I've got a multimeter at work that I bought. I was pretty proud of this multimeter because it was $500 when I bought it.
Simpson? Fluke?
No, it's a Fluke 289. And now it's starting to mouth. Yeah. So I say I bought this when I first started the job that I'm at right now still. So it's 18 and a half years old. It's starting to get squirrely, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to replace it before I retire. And if I do, I'm definitely, yeah, its direct replacement is a $900 meter. And I'm not spending $900 on a meter.
You know, I watched some videos on a guy that would analyze test equipment.
Oh, really?
And what he found out a lot of times is that it's not a difference in the quality of the measurement.
Mm-hmm.
It's a difference of the safety of the unit when it experiences something that it shouldn't experience.
Like measuring ohms on 120 volts?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You check ohms on a 9-volt battery and blow it.
Okay, so multimeter is probably the most common test instrument that you'll ever come across. It combines your voltmeter functions, ohm meter functions, and ammeter functions. And you do want to pay attention because not every function that you do will have the same limits. So you have to, and like on mine specifically, there's 4 jacks at the bottom. So I had, depending on what I'm checking and what the limit for what I'm checking is needed, I have to pick the right jack for the red lead. The black lead, I think, goes in the same all the time. Voltmeter setting measures potential in volts, and ohm meter setting measures resistance in ohms, and ammeter measures in amperes. I don't have the need for amperes very often, so I'm usually on the milliamp range. Not a lot of current for gyroscopes. Common mistakes are measuring voltage while you have it set up for resistance. Now, and mine obviously works really well because it won't do anything if I try to measure voltage with it still in the ohm meter position.
On a cheaper one, you do it once.
On a cheaper one, you only get one shot at it. Yeah,
Well,
so
most of them have a fuse.
Yeah.
Then you have to open it up and replace the fuse.
Yeah. But it has the potential to cause damage, so keep that in mind. And there's a couple of versions of a Simpson. The 5006, I've never actually seen one, but it looks to be a pretty decent meter. The one on the right there, the Simpson 260 analog meter, this was my bread and butter
That was the classic.
when I went to Navy avionics school. That's what we used. And then I thought we were going to get fancy new equipment when we went to the fleet. I got out there and what was on my bench? A 260.
Probably a lot more ran through too.
What's that?
Probably a lot more ran through too.
Yeah, they get abused pretty much when they're at sea. They take care of them in the schools because it's harder to get them replaced.
I've got a Radio Shack that's similar to the 5006. And it has a little transistor. Tester built. in.
Really? That's
Yeah,
pretty
most of
sick.
the cheap ones will do transistors, capacitors.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Temperature.
By the time I was in there, all everything.
Yeah.
Yep, stick its legs down in there and
Yeah, that's kind of the standard where I work. All of the multimeters are
it's
Fluke.
way, yeah.
But mine is, even though mine was cutting edge when I bought it
Oh,
18
yeah.
and a half years ago, it's the old man unit now.
Yeah, the one we used to use had the little thing clip, stick it on a
Yeah.
wire and it give you the amps.
Yeah.
There's a guy shows up at Hamfest.
Yeah.
Down in Melbourne. That sells those Simpsons.
The
$5,000.
5,000, the 5,006,
No.
the 260? Yeah, that's a little overpriced for a 260. You keep an eye on the thrift shops, you probably find one for $2.50. Okay, moving on. Which of the following measurements are made using a multimeter?
Charlie.
Charlie.
Charlie, voltage and resistance. Yeah. Uh, yeah, some multimeters, I'm looking at impedance and reactance. You can't measure impedance with a multimeter, but you can measure capacitors and inductors on some multimeters, not all of them. They'll have a mode for that. Which of the following can damage a multimeter?
Alpha.
Alpha.
Re,
Hmm.
yeah, reread it.
If I could read, I would know.
Charlie.
Failing connect. Measured volume.
Okay, so they
I would agree.
they threw a monkey wrench into it here. By the A is almost correct. It's just backwards.
I didn't even read.
Or setting attempting to.
Yeah, but attempting to measure voltage while your
Voltage.
meter is set to measure
Resistance.
resistance. Yeah, with some it's going to damage the meter. With others, it might just might be able to resist it. Voltmeters measure electric potential across parallel connections. I'm sorry, measures electric potential across a component, and this is a parallel connection. So if you want to measure across a component, you don't have to isolate it and put the meter in line. You just one side of the component to the other side of the component, and you get a reading. Low to high voltage settings, analog, or it can be an analog or digital display. The analog display actually comes in handy measuring some things over the digital display. The thing is, the ones with the digital display probably already have a function to measure those components. Displays measure units in volts. It acts as a very high resistance in parallel and ensures the voltmeter is, or you need to ensure that the voltmeter is rated for the voltage to be measured. So if you're going and beyond the voltage, you want to make sure that the multimeter is also capable of the current.
So Busu's, the high-end multimeters, they're like a meg ohm or something,
What's that?
the
Yeah.
resistance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Displays the measurement units and okay, so I was just talking about a voltmeter. Okay, I was going to relate that to something else. Which instrument would you use to measure electric potential?
Bravo.
Bravo, a voltmeter. How is a voltmeter connected to a component to measure applied voltage?
Oh,
This flashcard is doing good.
In parallel, yeah, no need to isolate anything. I mean, that's something you do for
Christmas lights.
what?
Christmas lights.
So yeah, and well, ohm meters, we're gonna get to that though, I'm sure. I didn't go over this material yesterday, so which of the following precautions should be taken when measuring high voltage with a voltmeter? And Rick, you said Bravo?
Yep.
Ensure the voltmeter and leads are rated for use at the voltages to be measured. That is correct. Ohm meters measure resistance by supplying a known current to a circuit. Now, this is what I was gonna mention just a minute ago when it said the measures and displays in volts. And a lot of people don't get how the ohm meter is working, but it gives you it applies a known current to a circuit. And then since the current is known, it can derive the resistance
By measuring the voltage.
by measuring the voltage.
Is there a little tiny smoke guy with the abacus doing
Yeah.
the math?
A small quick student like we have. They can count atoms, something.
Okay, and the ohm meter converts the voltage to resistance by using Ohm's law. Analog or digital display again, and all of these meters are gonna have that. Displays measurement units in ohms. Reading increases over time if a large capacitor is in the circuit. And this is what I was saying about you can tell if a capacitor is functioning by watching the pointer on your analog meter. Now, it doesn't tell you if the value has wandered, but you can see that it is actually working.
It's easier to do on the analog than digital.
Yeah.
See a charge or just.
Reading decreases over time if the large inductor in the circuit. Ensure the circuit being measured is
Not power.
yes, you don't want power. We discussed that.
Now, when I was doing air conditioning work, I was told to check a capacitor. I don't remember, it wasn't on ohms. You put it on volts. You touch one lead and you touch the other one and the needle will jump. If it jumps, it's good. If it doesn't jump, it's not no good.
That's the startup capacitor.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, to get it.
Yeah.
Discharge.
It don't go over and stay, it'll jump.
Yeah. Okay. Did I get down to the end of that one? Yeah, ensure the circuit being measured is not powered. For ohm meters. How is an ohm meter connected to a component to measure its resistance?
I think Tom was looking for the cascade failure or not.
Bottle. I think this is one of the ones I missed.
I'll buy that.
Well, it says measuring a component. So you want to measure the resistance of a single component. So you do before and after, so it'd be easier.
Okay, well, then,
Yeah, it doesn't actually say that, does it? Okay,
so it'd be in parallel.
yeah, they're gonna be in parallel to the,
Going from one side to the other.
yeah,
Maybe.
so if this is a resistor and you wanna check it to see what its resistance is. You put one lead on this side and your other meter lead to the lead on this side of so the meter itself is in parallel.
Through the resistance.
Yeah.
If you want to measure the resistance of a circuit, you do it in series.
Now, the one thing about taking resistance measurements is because you remember what it said that the meter applies a known current, right? Well, that circuit is gonna, all the connections in that circuit are gonna allow current to flow where current will
Correct.
flow. So to get a true measurement of what this resistor is, you're gonna wanna lift the lead on one side. Measure just through that component. Because if you leave it connected in the circuit, not only is it measuring across this resistor, but it's also measuring through all the other parallel and series branches.
Measure backwards through there, right, okay.
So, and there's a,
Normally, you're kind of looking when you're troubleshooting for a short circuit, not so much what the value of that resistor is.
So you're looking when you put it on there, you're looking for it to go over and just stay. It's not gonna give you a reading on the ohm.
Open or close.
Right.
Yeah, it depends on the
It'll
range you
either
set for.
register all the way or it won't.
I'm totally, I'm sorry, so, I mean, if you were to measure before and after the component, wouldn't that be in series? Cause you know,
Well, where is the,
You're measuring in parallel. If you're on both sides of the component.
to measure in
Because-
series, you'd have to
because-
lift one side and then, okay, so like to measure across the component. If you wanted to get a true resistance of just that one component, you need to lift one lead and then you measure from one lead on one side to the lead on the other side. Now, if you're putting it in series, like you would do if you're measuring current, you would have one lead on the lead to this and then the other lead to the through hole or pad where, and that puts the meter in series. And that's what you have to do for it. We're gonna discuss, I guess. Current is next, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah. So if you're measuring across the component, you're measuring parallel. If you're putting it in line with the component, it would be in series. Okay, so which of the following precautions should be taken when measuring in-circuit resistance with an ohm meter?
Bravo.
In-circuit ohm meter, okay, Bravo sounds good. There we go. What reading indicates that an ohm meter is connected across a large discharged capacitor?
Alpha.
Okay, Alpha, remember when we went over that just a few slides ago, we said increasing resistance with time would indicate a large capacitor, but decreasing resistance over time would indicate an inductor.
Cause you're actually charging the
Yeah.
capacitor up, cause you got a constant current coming out of
Yeah.
the ohming.
Okay, so ammeters measures current in a circuit, must be inserted, second line there, must be inserted in series with the circuit. So you actually have to make a break in the circuit somewhere and put the ammeter in. Now, Rick stated a while ago that he has, they're called clamp meters, and it's just two big C clamps and you open them up, put it around the wire and it senses the current flowing through there.
It's basically measuring the magnetic field around the wire.
Yeah, because if you don't have one of those, you can wrap your wire around it and that'll give you the amps. But
Yeah.
you gotta know how many times to wrap it, I believe.
We
So-
just did it with a timing light in my dad's car.
Yeah.
For spark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same
My,
idea.
My wife got me
Thank Michael
because
Faraday.
because I'm old and fat. My
No,
wife
no,
got
thank
me,
Michael Faraday for all those inductive,
Yes.
yeah.
she got
Faraday
me
was a
a
genius.
lawnmower for Father's Day. So the first thing I did was get online and find a deck wash for my new riding lawnmower and a time meter because all the maintenance schedule is based on hours of runtime. And there's no runtime meter built into it. So I got it's called an inductive time meter because it was the easiest one to install. But yeah, you make 5 wraps around the spark plug wire, tuck it, and then run the wire up, and then the wire doesn't even connect to the meter. It's just got a little groove, and you tuck the wire into that little groove. You don't have to remove any of the insulation or anything. You just tuck it in there, screw it down in place, and voila, it's counting time. Whenever there's spark plug fire, it's got the thing going.
So I wanna know why amateur radio people study so many old dead white guys.
Good question. Right now, they're
Okay, so anyway, must be inserted in series. You can use analog or digital display. Displays measurement units in amperes, and like I say, a lot of the stuff that I work on doesn't require amperes, so I always use the milliamp range. Ensures the ammeter is rated for, or ensure that the ammeter is rated for the current to be measured. Because that will probably, well, that should blow a fuse before it damages
I don't
the meter.
very seldom ever use my multimeter to measure amps.
What do you use?
I don't usually have to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a lab power supply that displays how many amps is.
One of the units that I work on, we have to replace bearings in a small electric motor. And to be sure that you get the preset on the bearings and everything so that you get good smooth running operation, but not too tight that it binds. If you bind it too much, it'll draw excessive current. So we have to check the measure, and we have to get between, I think it's between 380 and 620 milliamps. Is what that motor draw should be. But of course, being a good aviation technician, I always have my book open so I don't have to memorize the numbers. What instrument is used to measure electric current?
Delta.
Delta, an ammeter. And that looks good. When configured to measure current, how is a multimeter connected in a component? Or how is it connected to a component? And remember, that was the second line. Sorry,
In series.
Bravo.
in series.
Oh,
This one is current. Current has to flow through the meter, so we need it in series. Okay, soldering. Um, soldering is an essential skill if you're an electronics technician. So we generally use rosin core solder for electronic circuits, not acid core. Acid core, I guess, is plumbing, right?
Plumbing.
Plumbing stuff, yeah. So you want to use a good rosin core solder. If you don't have rosin core solder, you just have plain solder, you're going to need some flux. Flux is important. Heat the components enough to cause solder to flow. And what I'm going to point out here is that the solder will only flow to the surfaces that have been sufficiently heated. So
And
when
clean.
and clean. And the flux, that's one of the jobs of the flux. If you put a little bit of flux on there, the flux will clean the surface. As soon as you apply the heat to it, it'll clean the surface so that it will take solder. But when it says heat the components enough to cause the solder to flow, you also have to heat the pad on the board or the through hole. So
If you
you,
connect the two things together, you need to heat both of them at the same
yeah,
time.
both surfaces.
Otherwise, we'll just kind of do this like.
Yeah,
So
well,
a lot of solder, but it won't be a connection.
Yeah. And if you hear people, like a lot of times I'll take a unit and look and you can tell that somebody tried to solder it. But they only got the lead of the component hot and they didn't get the pad hot. And this is common with some of the older Honeywell equipment, because when they manufactured those boards, they weren't made to be repaired technically. They were made to put them together, and when they were done, you threw it away and got another one. The pads on there, slightest amount of heat on the pad will make the pad lift off the board. So you do have to be careful, but and most of the stuff that I've worked on that it is not Bendix King stuff. I've never had that problem with.
What my brother would say, if you're buying your avionics from a company known for making thermostats, you're buying from the wrong company.
Yeah. Why the Honeywell? Yeah, what he's saying is Honeywell bought the Bendix King lines, the older lines, and so yeah, it's
My brother was in charge of one of the revisions, actually a couple of revisions of the C5. But they had common mode failure. They had pilot computer, co-pilot computer, and then backup computer. And usually you have a different model computer running different software doing the same job. So you're going to have common mode failure. Well, the guy who had signed off on it before my brother was put over the job had bought all Honeywell, and it had a number of common mode failures that he had to deal with.
Yeah. I probably shouldn't say this, but yeah, if I were buying an airplane, and the reason I shouldn't say this is because all we have is test and check capability on this stuff. If I were buying an airplane, I would want all Garmin cockpit.
Oh, yeah.
That Garmin is rock solid, but they don't let anybody work on their stuff. All we can do is test and check it. So a customer sends it to us for repair, we test it and tell them it failed, you're right, it's bad. And all we can do is send it in and broker the repair for them. So that eliminates my job almost entirely. So I won't say that. Anyway, good joint should appear bright and shiny. Bad joints will be dull and grainy or lumpy as, I'm sorry, what was your name? Jesse. Like Jesse pointed out a while ago, you know, if it looks lumpy, you didn't get things hot enough. This comes into, quality of your soldering. If you should ever have the reason to solder anything in your amateur radio world, comes in the $12, 12-watt soldering iron at Walmart in the automotive section needs to be left in the automotive section. It will get hot enough to melt solder, but it's only 12 watts. And the wattage is important for recovery. So as soon as you touch it to something and it sucks the heat out of it, 12 watts can only heat it back up again so fast. So the recovery time is essential. I've got one of those at home that I bought thinking that I could use it to solder some pins on, because all I was doing was soldering some pins on. And I'm gonna cut the cord off of it and dump it in the trash can because I got a better unit.
And the longer you heat something, the more time it has
Yeah,
for the heat flow and, you know,
Yeah.
heat up.
Other
rest of the
stuff,
yeah,
You're better off, if you're good, a very hot iron and be quick.
yeah.
Or either put you something on there to absorb the heat.
What's your better solder?
I'm sorry?
What's your better solder then? Soldering iron? Are
Um,
you,
Well, I got one off of, it's, I think it's a 75 or 80-watt iron, but it's got temp ranges from 400 to 900 degrees that you can set and monitor. It's got you know, well, it self monitors. So as soon as you touch it to something and the temperature starts to drop, it starts putting juice into it to warm it back up again. But it's, you know, I got it
you
off of
recall the
Amazon.
brand?
I'll spell it for you. It's YIHUA.
Okay.
Now, you know, at work, I don't expect it to be as good as my soldering equipment at work, but I don't want to drive to Melbourne. You know, I live here in Cocoa, and I don't want to drive 35 miles to Melbourne to go into the shop on the weekend and solder an antenna together. So I just decided to get one for the house. And my wife won't let me spend the $1,200 on the paste station. So I decided to spend $75 on this soldering iron off of Amazon. But the wattage is the thing you want to look at. And of course, quality, you know, and this particular brand of soldering iron tends to be have a good following amongst hobby type people,
Okay.
people that buy it for their hobbies. But the one thing you will get an answer on all the time with that soldering iron in the Walmart automotive department is that it doesn't get very hot. It'll
Yeah.
get hot enough to melt solder, but you're not gonna do much more than that with it.
You really need a 30 to 40 watt
Yeah,
minimum.
minimum 30 to 40
And
watt.
preferably temperature controlled, but then you're
Yeah.
talking more money. So if you don't do much soldering, it may not be worth spending $100 or
Yeah.
something like that for it.
Okay.
So anyway, your good
Corporate
joint.
freight specialist doesn't let me guess.
What's that?
My Harbor Freight special still isn't let me.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I can tell you one thing,
How many watts is it?
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah,
you don't have one that's gonna heat it up enough, it's hard to solder with.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, and which of the following types of solder should not be used for radio and electronics applications?
Alpha.
Alpha, the acid core solder. When you're looking at solders besides acid or rosin core, the other thing that you're gonna see is a tin and lead composition. And 6337 tends to be the norm these days, although when I went through school, it was 60/40.
Now, do you think that B and C that, I mean, B and D, they're giving you a big hint? Solar versus solder?
Well,
That could be my type of.
the solder they give you a little tube with a little coil of solder in it. It's basically a sample.
I like cherry soda myself.
Basically, the 6337 has a lower melting point than 60/40.
Yeah.
And if you add a couple percent of silver, it even lower.
Yeah. The solder that came with my solder station that I bought is 99% lead or 99% tin.
But you're still gonna have what, a temperature of 397 degrees, even with the 6337 or whatever it is,
More like 350.
350.
Well, we set everything at work at 600,
Yeah.
but that's because of recovery time,
Fahrenheit or centigrade.
Fahrenheit. Yeah, but that's because of recovery, because you're if you step over there, you're probably looking to solder a couple of components in, and they don't want you sitting there daydreaming, checking your phone in between that. So everything is 600, and it recovers fast. But that's, $1,200 station too, so. What is the characteristic appearance of a cold tin lead? Okay, and I didn't specifically state that. When it's right there where it says bad joints look dull and grainy or lumpy, that's a cold solder joint. That means you didn't get something hot enough, either the lead of the component or the pad or through hole that you're soldering to did not get hot enough, and it makes it dull, grainy.
Yeah, like on through hole. At least the way I do it, I like to get little Hershey mounds, Hershey kisses. In other words, it'll flow and actually make a
Yeah.
Little convex or concave.
and you can actually,
Yeah.
you can actually tell it when it flows on there.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're watching anymore, I have to have a magnifier to see it, but you can see it when you touch it to it. You can see when it looks like it just sucks it in. Charlie, rough or lumpy surface.
Really?
Okay. Did you get that, Robert?
Yeah, I saw, yeah. I did not know that. Yeah. Got it.
Okay. Multimeter measures voltage, current, resistance. Never measure voltage when your meter set in a resistance setting. The voltmeter function will measure electrical potential, connect it in parallel to the component that you're measuring. Ensure that the leads and the instrument are rated for the voltage being measured. Ohm meters you connect also in parallel with the component being measured. Ensure that the circuit is not powered. If it's powered, you can cause damage to your meter. Increasing resistance indicates that you're charging a capacitor. And that, like I said, in the lesson material, it said increasing resistance over time indicates a charging of a capacitor. So if you're watching the pointer, you'll see the pointer gradually moving. Ammeters measures electric currents. You have to connect it in series because you want the current to go through the meter to be able to measure it. Soldering, you want to use the rosin core solder for electronics, not the acid core. You use enough heat to cause good solder flow, and remember that you have to heat not only the lead, but whatever you're soldering it to. Joints should be bright and shiny. A dark and grainy indicates a bad joint, or what's known in the industry as a cold solder joint, because you didn't get it hot enough, or it was dirty. And that says stop recording.
Okay, gentlemen, my water's gone, so I'm gonna take my entertainment elsewhere.
Have a good day, Byron.
It's the best stuff coming up. Operating procedure.
Chicken dinner, chicken dinner, chicken dinner.
He's not kidding. That's his call sign.
For some reason or another, it doesn't want to stop recording while I'm there.
Try hitting the enter key when you're over there. No, there you go.